Hello again and welcome back. Today we're going to pick up here on the old 1970 Chevelle 396 SS. In the last video we discovered that the oil pressure regulator down there in the oil pump is seized. We're getting way too much oil pressure and it is just exploding oil filters. So we're going to dive right in, pull this old 396 out of here, do absolutely nothing else but just drop the pan, put in a new oil pump, fix nothing else we find, slap it back together, and see if we can get this old girl to actually run and drive on her own after sitting for probably over 40 years. So to get started here, I'm going to just start stripping things off the top. I'm going to get this throttle linkage out of here, which I think is just kind of loosely in place. Just got a little ball socket so the one end pops off. Just pull it out of underneath there. Get this free. Run it in this direction here. Now I could probably leave my plug wires and cap on. However, I'm just worried that I might end up crunching it or just getting it in an awkward position. So I am just going to go ahead and pull all that off. And it is really on there. Ouch. Okay, I know that last one back there is going to be a bear. So I'm going to skip it for now. Come over to this side. Try to get these ones off. That one went a little easier than some of the others. Oh man. There we go. It's like you got to get that wiggle just right, and then they come right out of there. Okay, so I did loosen my cap up already. That's just flopping around. This one back here, I kind of ran over the steering column, and it's difficult even getting access to this one back here in the first place. So let's see how we can do this. Oh, not too bad. Okay, all those should be loose. Oh, gotta disconnect our coil here. Get the cap out of here. Oop. Try not to trip on things. Go ahead and set this out of the way. Okay, so next up I'm going to get this battery out of here. I don't have any of this attached. Got the quick disconnect model here. Yeah, and I'm going to need two hands to get that out of here. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and try to get this alternator out of here now. Rather than going through all the trouble of disconnecting it, I'm hoping I can just unhook it from the engine here and just drop it right here on top of the nice new battery tray I got. Since the one on the car was missing, other than about an inch that wasn't rusted out on it. So let's see if we can get this loose. This is not the correct bolt, by the way, for this. It's just something I had to happen to have found laying around. It's probably a bit too tight because I haven't taken the lower nut loose. Okay, now we just need to get this lower nut off of here, which is a 9/16. Again, it's just a nut I had to find. One was not on here when I originally found the car, or bought the car rather. Go ahead and get our belt off. Oops, a little bit tricky to do. Just the one hand here. Now if I can spin the alternator back towards me, or so I hoped. Not sure what we're hitting on here. Okay, looks like there might be a bolt on the back of there that's catching on the head. That's good to know. You just barely see it in the back there. So I'm going to go ahead and set you down, see if I can get this free here. So I realized I'd have to remove this front bracket here, so I've just been slowly working on getting those free. And that should give me enough room to clear that bolt that has come loose in the back of the alternator there and is catching with the head. Just trying to make a mental game plan. I'm gonna have to go ahead and disconnect that fuel pump down there, which is probably a good time to do that while I'm down here. Looks like we got Mortzke's favorite, the flexi hose. Only for the lower though. The upper looks like it's an original style. As always with bolts, you know, you get it broke free, then it kind of gets easy and you're like, oh yeah, I can just do this with a hand, and then all of a sudden, no, it gets tight right at the end. So that's what we're up against here at the moment. Should have probably got the ratchet for this, but I had the wrench and I figured, why not? Well, maybe one of these days I'll be rich enough to afford those fancy Milwaukee tools I'm seeing all the new guys using. But hey, old school car, old school tools, I guess. Dear God, this thing is just never ending. Fortunately, it is not getting any easier as I'm going along here. So I'm going to go ahead and set you down again. Oh, nope. I just got a slightly bit easier there, so it's teasing me. It's like, oh yeah, you think it'd be a great time for a break in the video, and then all of a sudden it gets easier again, and you're like, okay, yeah, finally at the end. So get that bracket removed. Now let's see if we can spin this forward and out of the way enough. And it is fighting me. It just does not want to come. There we go. Okay, so the goal is to just slide that off of there very gently. Loose brackets, and then just set it down there out of the way. What do we lose here? Got a spacer with a bolt on the back. Okay. So I suppose I can get, probably not a bad idea to just remove this bracket for now. It's pretty loose here just to get some more space. That one is, spoke too soon again. It was finger tight up until I started actually turning it, and then of course this car just wants to fight me every which way. Oh no, that is not the sign for intermission. That is the sign that my little LED light is failing me. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in right quick while I go ahead and get this bracket off. Alright, so next up on the list, we're going to get this fan out of the way, along with our nice new belts that we did not get to use for very long. So on this particular fan, it's just 4 nuts here. Not sure if some of these were bolts, I've heard. I'm used to just seeing the studs on these. Go ahead and try to break them all free right quick. So hopefully this water pump will hold in here, because I do not have plans at this time of replacing this. I probably now just jinxed myself, as I have seemingly done a number of times on this car. Okay, all those are nice and loose. Try not to lose these lock washers. Go grab a little pan to put these in. My pan today is a Auto Value Frisbee. Usually I use the nice little magnetic trays, but for some reason I seem to either use them all up or I've misplaced them all. So when you're in a pinch, if you go to car shows or anything like that, and they usually give out the Frisbees, they work great for just temporary holding them. The only difference is if you drop it or give it the good old accidental bump, they do like to go flying. So you do want to keep that in mind with the Frisbee. Now I will be taking the radiator out of here, so I'll have to drain all of the fluid out of here anyway, which is a good idea since I didn't get around to flushing it. There was fluid in the car when I got it. I couldn't really tell what color it was or consistency or even maybe texture because it was a bit too low to see, so I just temporarily topped it off with water. And it's never a bad idea to flush these old cars out when they've been sitting, especially for about as long as this one seems to have been sitting for. Get our fan up and out of the way. Also gonna come in here and grab this pulley just so we don't lose that. So next up on the list here is the old power steering pump. Now I did put a new belt on this and ran it very temporarily, but it started leaking. So I took the belt off, and it was a good thing I did. I just noticed that the pulley here is not actually bolted on, it's just loosely hanging out there. So we'll go ahead and get this zipped off here. It looks like it's only 3 bolts holding it on. It's gonna be a little bit of fun because it looks like this adjuster one here that's on the front has a nut here in the back that I'm just to grab a hold of. It's going to be fun getting that all back together. It looks like it's got a couple of washers for a spacer. There's another one on the front of the block, just a little bit below in the back there. My finger's trying to poke through. Then we have another one in the back underneath going up this way, right back here. Just want to get those 3 zipped out of there. Get this power steering pump moved. We'll probably do the same thing with the alternator, just set it over here for now and out of the way. So after just a tiny little bit of a fight, I was able to get to that power steering pump removed. I ended up just disconnecting it entirely. All the fluid had already drained out of it. You can see some of it there on the floor anyway. And the way the hoses are routed, it looked like I wasn't going to be able to just shove it out of the way anyway. And the bracket was fighting me, so it was just easier to take it off. So coming over here on this side, next up I'm going to come and cut the fuel pump lines. I thought about fighting with these hoses and trying to get them off there for now, but I'm going to replace them anyway. It'll be much easier to just cut them and deal with that when the engine's out of here. And then I was looking down, and looks like the engine bolt mount, or the engine mount bolt, sorry, is missing here. That would usually go through the 2 engine mounts. I'm not sure if that's the case on the other side as well, so that's one less thing we have to worry about. But we'll make sure to replace those when we continue on. And then I'm going to go ahead and drain the radiator here, get these radiator hoses off. So I knocked out a couple of quick things here off camera. I got our booster disconnected, the coil's all disconnected, so all the electrical on this side should all be taken care of and out of the way. I threw the pressure gauge just here on top of the motor. The line should just ride with the engine, so that should all be out of the way. The bolt over here is missing as well for the engine mount, so the engine is equipped with the quick release option. I got that radiator drained and pulled out of here. Didn't really have any problems with that. Everything came out nice and clean. Did spill just a little bit down there, adding to the variety of fluids this car has dropped on the floor. I came to this side and started looking at things. And one thing of concern is this battery cable on this side. As you can see down there, it looks like it was jammed underneath the exhaust manifold and it started melting. So that's something I'll have to keep in mind when I put the engine back in here, to just make sure that I route that in a better manner. Next up, I want to get this hood out of the way, and this is going to be a bit of a chore since I'm flying solo here, so I'm going to try to come up with something creative, probably to prop this hood up and then just take each one of the hinges off and then see if I can manhandle the thing out of here on my own. So I'm going to give that a go, If the footage is a little bit too embarrassing, I apologize, because it's going to skip to this thing being off if that's the case. Okay. Okay, got that bolt removed. Now let's loosen this front one a little bit more. Now what I want to be able to do is carefully slide this backwards here. Okay, now I'm going to try to make my way over to the other side and do the same thing. Okay, here on the other side I've already got the back bolt removed. I'm going to carefully try to remove this last nut here. And with any luck I won't lose control of this and I won't come crashing down and destroy the camera and lights and everything else all at the same time. Okay, so we're free. Just kind of hang out there for a second. Perfect. Thank you, handy trusty broom. Alright, let's see what we get here. Just nice and slowly tilt her forward. It's the sound of dirt daubers. Okay, here we go. Oh, she is all there. That is a lot of dirt daubers. Okay, let me just settle over here. Whoops. I couldn't have done that if I tried again. Success. No broken fingers, no broken hoods. I had one incident there where I managed to catch the trim on the little emergency release for the door here. Down here at the back. This trim is a little loose and that caught me up there for a second. I thought I was in trouble. But we made it. A little out of wind here, so I'm going to catch my breath and we'll continue on. So here we find ourselves underneath the car once more. Always a pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and remove the starter here. It'll give us more clearance going over that cross member. I'll get the wires disconnected and just take it out of the car for now. That way I can lower the car and move it around without dragging the starter around. The real fun and joy is going to be getting this exhaust out. It's got one bolt new over on this side, but there's two originals still. It's going to be real tricky trying not to break those out. And then I'll have to come along to the flex plate up here, spin that around a couple of times, take out each of the bolts attaching the flex plate to the torque converter, because we're going to leave the torque converter and transmission in the car. Then we'll have to take off the bell housing bolts as well. Those will be a little bit more easy to access once this pipe's out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and start knocking that out of here, and I'll get you back in if there's anything interesting to shoot. Slowly making progress. I got the starter removed over there. I got the flex plate unbolted from the torque converter. The engine spins really smoothly now. It turns over really nice. The only thing we really have to fight is compression now, so that's great news. We're not getting any kind of binding or anything like that. The exhaust on that side came off really nice and easy. You can just barely make out the flange hanging out down here where I slid it back. Now the exhaust really didn't want to pull back any though. It's the way that the three bolts or the studs are set up, it's kind of holding the pipe in place even though it is free, so that'll just kind of come right out once we lift the engine up. So not really too concerned about that at the moment. Next up, need to work on this one here that's gotten a little bit more gooey. Hopefully this one comes off as easily as the other side. I'll try to get those last two bell housing bolts on this side, then there should be just two more along the top. And once I lower the car down again after that, I'll go ahead and slide something underneath here, underneath the transmission, probably under the torque converter to kind of pull the torque converter back a little bit, add some support there just so the transmission doesn't drop and the torque converter doesn't slide off the front. And it'll also help support the input shaft there a little bit as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get that knocked up. Hopefully everything goes nice and smoothly. All right, things are going pretty well so far. Got the exhaust off on the driver's side. Everything came out nice and easy. Now there's just 2 more bolts back here in the back. Down there holding on the bell housing to the motor. I do have the transmission supported. I've got some rubber down there with a couple of wooden blocks holding the transmission up, as well as the torque converter in place. So I'm going to go ahead and get those bolts removed. Then I'll be able to take the carburetor off, get the engine lift plate on here, and we should be all set to pull this motor out. I got those last couple of bell housing bolts removed. It really wasn't too bad pulling them out there from behind up on the top. Came out nice and easy. Got the cherry picker installed underneath here, got my lift plate installed. I don't think I'll need the engine balancer. I did need to come and put the car on jack stands because the cherry picker was too tall to fit underneath here. I didn't quite realize how low the control arms on these things sit. They are low to the ground. That probably explains why the front cross member there is dragged a number of times. So now I'm all ready to give this thing a couple of cranks, see if it starts breaking free from everything, and get this thing sucked out of here. Alright, we should be all set to give this thing a couple of cranks and see what happens. See a little bit of movement there. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second, just check everything over. It looks like we came up and out of the engine mounts with no issues. Looks like we got some decent clearance. I'm going to go ahead and jack up the transmission to kind of match the same level that the engine's at currently here. So I went ahead and adjusted the level of the jack that was holding up the torque converter and the transmission. I've got those raised up now. So we should be good to try to lift this up a little bit more. Should be clear of most things as far as I can tell. So I've been slowly lifting the engine and keeping the transmission sort of in synchronization here as I lift. I believe I'm probably done jacking up the transmission at this point. Should just have a little bit higher to go on the engine here before I can try to pull it forward and break it free, which is always a little bit scary, but everything should be disconnected. I'm going to give it a couple of quick tugs here. Okay, came forward a little bit. So after that short little tug there, you can see down in there, and you can see that there's now a gap between the engine and the transmission. Our torque converter is staying in place, so everything's looking good. Now I can raise the engine up a few more tugs and it should come free. Alright, everything is looking free. I gave it a little bit of a tug and the engine popped forward. Everything is looking good under here. I'm going to go ahead and just slowly lift her up and out. Looks like we are dripping just a little bit of coolant that was left over in the block. Not a problem. I'm just going to check right quick for any attached wires, anything like that. Looks like we are pretty good. Our fuel lines here are just grabbing a hold of some of the wires. I'm just making sure that those will all stay in place. We seem to be free. Let's keep going. Okay, wow. It's a very good thing I picked up new motor mounts for this thing. The motor mount over here is completely blown apart. I'll have to probably show you that here in a second. It's like raising the Titanic here. So with the engine removed here, let's take a closer look. At first glance, all of the freeze plugs in the back look to be pretty good. Don't see a whole lot of grime here in the rear. As we come this way, it gets a bit more greasy and slimy, since this is where we kept blowing out the oil filters and just spraying oil everywhere. You can see that little plastic line. I do have a replacement for that, so I'll probably put a gauge inside the car where we can monitor that more closely. You can see what's left of that body mount over here that kind of came apart. There's the remnants down there. freeze plugs look to be okay on this side. They're hanging in there. Don't really see any surprises here on the oil pan. I'll probably scrape all that off here with some engine degreaser, give it a power wash tomorrow. Make sure it's nice and clean. Front is very grimy, which not that uncommon. That center bolt there for the crank is pretty much rounded all the way. That's where someone was cranking on it trying to get this thing to break free. This fuel pump here is definitely a lot older looking than I thought. When I first started to look at this, I thought it was a replacement and was newer and less grimy than the engine, but upon closer inspection here, it's pretty bad, so we'll go ahead and replace that. Looking over here, you can see most of our freeze plugs in place. There's a dirt dauber made a home in the one way in the back there. Engine mount on this side is in place. However, it looked like it was bashing against the mount, but that could be from the fact that it wasn't bolted in. Pretty grimy under here. Torque converter is still in place there. No real surprises for what I can see on the firewall. I don't really see any new rot or rust anywhere. Everything looks pretty good. You can definitely see over here that inner fender is pretty mangled up. So I'm going to have to pull all that apart, try to work on that fender at some point, but that is a video for a different day. For now, this is our concern. I'm going to probably move this over, set it on the ground for tonight. We'll pick up first thing in the morning, get this oil pan off. Well, probably clean it first. Hit it with a bunch of cans of engine degreaser tomorrow, let it sit for most of the day. Let it really get in there and work in, and then come through with the blaster and clean all this up. So we'll pick it up again tomorrow morning. So the plan for now is to come along here, scrape off a lot of this grime and build up under here, then we'll hit it with the degreaser. That'll just help make sure that everything gets nice and soaked in there, get all this cleaned up. I did start a little bit. You can actually see some Chevy orange underneath all of that, so I'll get you set up here if that kind of thing seems satisfying to you, and we'll scrape a little bit of this off. So I've got a couple of blades here, just one's about a 3-inch, then maybe 1.5 inches, 2-inch here, and just kind of trying to get some of the bigger chunks off of here. And looks like there's a couple of ribs in this thing, or possibly dents. But just getting some of this real thick stuff off, like here. Oof, especially there in the back. That'll just make it easier for our degreaser to work. Quite a lot there in the front. Some on the engine block at the top here. Well, it's not so bad up on the engine itself, just a lot down here on this pan. Quite a bit of buildup just on this head right here. We'll just get rid of some of that. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it just helps. Makes it easier for the degreaser to do its work. Some of this easy big stuff is just off of here. I scrubbed it down a bit more with that wire brush, and next up I'm just gonna give it a nice bath here and super clean. It seems to work pretty well. I mean, there's a bunch of different products you can use. This one was readily available, not too expensive, so we're gonna just soak this thing. Just kind of spray it everywhere. Give it a nice, thick, heavy bath. And Just let this soak in as much as we can. Maybe hit it a couple of times here. Then after that, we'll come back and hit it with the pressure washer and see if we can rinse the rest of this off of here. I'll let the engine here soak for about 10 minutes. I'm going to get the old pressure washer fired up here, blast it off, and see what she looks like. Could probably do another cycle or two of just hitting it with the degreaser, then rinsing it off. We'll see if we can get this thing cleaned up just a little bit better, but it came out pretty good after one cycle so far. There's still quite a bit of grime on here, but definitely a whole lot better than it was. Good enough for our purposes. So I'm going to drag this back inside here, get away from the road noise. We'll start working on getting this oil pan off here, get that oil pump out, and get this thing fixed up. Got the oil drained out, what was left in there that didn't spill out on its own. Next, I'm just going to go around, start taking off these oil pan bolts. I got this pan pulled off and it's pretty clean under here. There's not a whole lot of sludge buildup in here, similar to like the top end was as well. Coming back here in the back, there's just a little bit of thick, heavy oil, but it's not sludging yet. It's pretty clean in there. Not finding any kind of metallic flake, just kind of heavy oil, but really not bad at all. That is a good sign. So here we have what we came for. This is the oil pump removed from the engine. Looking at the tag there, it looks like it's just an M77, just a milling. Standard pressure, standard volume, that's exactly what I'm replacing it with. I'm not a huge fan of dropping the high volume, high pressure pumps in these, especially if it's just a stock engine. Looking at the pickup here, I think we can probably identify what our issue is. There is a lot of just really thick, heavy, flaky, like RTV or something similar to that just jammed in here. I was sitting in there picking at it and it's pretty gooey or whatever it is. I don't really see that anywhere else in the pan when I was looking through here, so I'm not sure if that was just remnants of the old gasket perhaps, or if they just tried to RTV it with something and it just got sucked up in there, but there's quite a bit of buildup in there. So curiosity got the better of me. I took that old oil pump apart, and this is the bottom plate that I usually bolt to the bottom here, and it'd cover up these two veins. Essentially these two veins will just run and it squeezes the oil in between them, and then it pushes it out to this side. And that's really all there is to it. Works pretty much the same as like a root style supercharger would work. So on the bottom here, there's a piston that gets installed through this hole here, and then there's a spring and then a little washer in the back and a set pin that holds this all under tension. And I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up under inside of there, but there's a little metal piston in there that's supposed to move back and forth like this. And then oil will come in this way through this hole here, get pressurized, and it should push on this piston back here. And when the pressure becomes too significant, that piston should slide backwards and allow excess oil to exit through these two ports here. However, in this particular case, the piston is seized up. I was sitting there trying to work it free a bit and I cannot get it to budge the tiniest amount. I was looking through there and it looks like there's a little bit of rust on it and stuff like that. So that is definitely the cause of our issue. That is why we had too much pressure and we're blowing out the oil filters. Before I put this back together again, I've just been coming through here and giving it a visual inspection underneath, and again, it's really clean under here. There's not a lot of sludge buildup. There's really not a whole lot of anything here on the inside. It's just nice and clean. I haven't been able to find any markings on the bottoms of the pistons or anything like that. I did come through and wiggle all the caps. Everything is nice and tight. We don't have any loose connecting rods or anything like that, so all of our bearings should be happy for now. Moving along here, I got the oil pan all nice and cleaned up. There was a lot of this really thick, heavy, just clay-like buildup at the bottom of it. So I went ahead, scraped all of that out of there, used a couple of cans of brake parts cleaner to soften it up as best I could. Then I got in there with my hands and just scraped all the grime and sludge off the bottom, so it came out really clean now. I don't want anything being caught up in this new oil pump that I've got installed. I put the pickup screen in the correct location. I measured, tested everything, made sure it's not hitting the bottom of the pan, so we're all good there. I've got the new one-piece gasket just temporarily installed with the little clips that come along with it. Makes installing the oil pan really nice and easy. I do need to come along and just put some RTV up here in the four corners. You can see how it's got this little ridge right here. That tries to accommodate for the fact that there's this mating surface between the engine block and the timing cover. But it's still best to just come in here, hit it with a little bit of RTV in these four corners. That'll just guarantee you don't have any leaks. After that, I do need to knock out these engine mounts. They're pretty beat up. I do have some new ones, so we'll just get that taken care of. The other side was blown apart entirely. So I believe once we have all that taken care of, we should be ready to drop this motor right back in. I've got everything on the engine all buttoned up now. Oil pan is fully torqued down. I did reinstall the dipstick. It's very easy to forget this. I also did seal it up down here where it enters the pan just to make sure we don't have any leaks. I've got the new motor mounts installed on both sides. Still waiting for the fuel pump. Hopefully that'll show up tomorrow, but that's easy enough to change with the engine in the car, so that shouldn't stop us for today. I did pick up some new exhaust gaskets. For the heat riser here, there's two. There's one that gets sandwiched between the heat riser and the manifold. It was missing that one. And then there's a donut that goes on the bottom. That one was in pretty poor condition. Over on this side, I did grab a couple of new oil filters. I do not have them installed yet, just because I don't want to bash it up while installing the motor. Grabbed us some new radiator hoses, which we'll put in once everything's back in place. But for now, I believe everything should be taken care of. We should be ready to line this up, get it dropped back in. It was a bit of a struggle, but I got the engine back in here. I've got the radiator mounted up. I've put the alternator back in. The battery's connected. Starter's all connected. I've got the motor mount bolts installed. However, the ones I picked up were way too long, so they're just installed to keep everything connected, but they're not bolted in place. So I will need to take care of that. I figured while we're at it, before we go cranking on this thing, I do have the nice little Tesla here that I picked up not too long ago, so we probably should have done this from the start, but let's take a peek down the bore. So I've got the old Tesla here down cylinder number 2, and you can see there's a bit of buildup down there. Try to get it where you can see. There's some rust on the cylinder walls. It doesn't look too terribly bad, but I mean, it does look a little pitted in some places, so it's definitely going to burn some oil. That probably won't come around very quickly on its own. Here we have cylinder number 4. It looks pretty much the same as cylinder number 2. A bit of rust on the walls there, so this whole thing sat for quite some time. It's hard to tell just how bad that is, if it's really pitted or not, so we're just going to have to wait and see if this comes around. We have to run some thick, heavy oil in it to keep the smoking down for now, but as long as we can get a couple of miles out of it, it's not a huge deal. We just want to see what we can get out of this old engine. I finished connecting the last of the things. I got the carburetor back on here, got the coil hooked up, made sure everything was connected properly, got the battery charger buzzing away on the battery there. So we should be ready for the moment of truth now. It's getting a little bit late. I don't want to run this for very long, but I do just want to see if our oil pressure issues have been resolved. I did prime the pump. It was getting around, maybe around 50, 60-ish on the gauge here just while I was priming it. So that seemed to be a good sign. I'm not exactly sure what RPM I was turning at, so everything should be all primed here. I did fill the bowl up. Hopefully we'll get this thing to kick off here and see what we get. Well, that seems like a win to me. It looks like it only came up to about 60, but then again, remember the gauge is broken, so it's probably maybe somewhere in the 40s, 50 range. That is pretty good. I do have 10 weight oil in this for right now. So I'm very happy. I did not hear anything coming out of the filter. And I'm going to pack everything away for the night, pick up first thing in the morning. We'll try to get fuel finally up from our boat tank. Again, still waiting on Amazon to deliver the actual tank. I've got a fuel pump coming that should be here in the morning. I'll pick that up. Hopefully that'll be the right one. We'll get that slapped on here. We'll try to get fuel up from the boat tank again. Maybe I'll try to pressurize the return and see if it blows out the feed line now that I've got those two still just disconnected down here. That'd be a good way of just making sure everything's making it through the actual boat tank system. But I am really hyped again. It's been a little bit of an up and down with this car. It took me way longer than I hoped to get this engine out of here and get it back in. It's really difficult to do some of this solo, and there is not a lot of room on these Chevelles. Man, it was a lot harder to work on than I thought. So, pick it up again first thing in the morning, and we'll go from there. Morning has come again, and we're back on the old Chevelle. I got the new fuel pump installed down there. It was clocked slightly different than the one that I pulled off of there, so it was a little bit of a chore getting the hard lines all adjusted for it, but everything is connected there. Got the fan reinstalled, topped off all of our fluids, put hose clamps on all of the one new radiator hose. I still need to pick up a new lower hose down there. The one I picked up was not the right one. For some reason there are different inlet and outlet sizes on that lower hose there, so still need to score one of those, but everything else should be buttoned up. We still need to figure out how to get fuel up there from our boat tank. Everything should be connected. Hopefully it was just fuel pump, so I've got the vent open on that. Everything is still connected back here. Make sure there's some fuel in there. Yep, maybe about a third of the way full. So now we're gonna see if we can get fuel up here to the bowls and get this thing to run and idle on its own. Fingers crossed. Despite my best attempts, I still had issues getting fuel up here to the fuel pump. That old fuel pump may have actually been good. I'm able to get air through the lines, but I'm just not able to get enough fuel flow, so it just keeps starving out. So I do have the boat tank just sitting up here. I did prime all this, so I cracked it here at the carburetor, made sure that fuel is getting up there. So we should be all set to go here. I have the vacuum advance temporarily disconnected. I got my timing light, so if we do get this up and running, I just want to quickly scan the timing. So we're going to give her a crank and see what happens. Oil pressure is looking okay. No weird noises. A little bit of an exhaust leak. No leaking fluids. So that is a win. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the timing light here and try to get an idea of what RPM we're idling at. Start dialing this thing in. So I got her fired up here, idling right around 900 RPM. I've been checking timing here. It looks like we're at, not sure if the camera will pick that up or not, but we are right at 25 degrees of initial timing, which is a bit too much. I did rev it up a little bit. I didn't really rev it to the moon, and we are getting mechanical advance. I'm not sure what the limit is. I don't know if they just set this thing up to run at 25 initial and then max out. I mean, typically you want to stay somewhere around like 34 degrees. So I could probably set this up to 34, give it a rev, get it up over around 2000 RPM, see what it sounds like. See what it shows up there on the little gauge. See what we get all in, but it gets a little bit rough up there in those upper RPMs, so might wait for it to come around a little bit more. It's been settling in pretty well. There's not much smoke out anymore out the back here, just a couple of puffs. So a little bit on this side, just barely. So she's coming around. This will be really its first heat cycle in, I'm guessing, probably 40 years. So we're just going to slowly bring her up to temp, keep babysitting it. I've got the old thermometer here. just about getting to where the thermostat should be opening. So I may just shut her down here in a second, let her cool off. Our oil pressure is probably hanging right around, let's see, if we factor in the initial 16-ish, probably somewhere around 40 pounds. Pretty happy with that. So after a couple of quick revs there, just around the 2000 RPM, I was up to 39. Now we're getting all the way up to 39 degrees, so that's a bit too much mechanical advance for what I want. I'm gonna go ahead and get the old distributor wrench out. We're gonna dial that back. It's been a couple more minutes here. I got the timing back down to about 14 degrees now. It's smoothed out a little bit. Revved it up and I'm getting about around 33 all in so far. As high as I dare rev it. I'll have to check and make sure that there's actually a limit there. We're not pushing too much timing. Getting a little bit of blue smoke now out the back. It's still just the first heat cycle here. I haven't shut it off and it's just been idling away here on its own for probably a good 10 minutes. Temperature is slowly creeping up, but nothing too terrible. Just hanging in there, enjoying our first long run. I've been topping off the transmission fluid here as we go, and it's very, very, very low. I've put in 3 quarts already, and it's still not showing up on the dipstick here now that I've been able to get it to run long enough. I just kind of put in a quart, I run it through the gears, wait a couple of seconds in each gear, then throw it back in park, check the level after a couple minutes, add some more fluid. So we'll need to pick some more up. It's sounding great still. Hopefully we can get this transmission to come together. We can see if we can get this thing to engage properly, move under its own power properly, and not just sit there and slip. I continue topping off the transmission fluid here on the old Chevelle, and now she's engaging really well. She's moving under her own power really nicely. Get a nice solid engagement when you drop her down in gear. Topped off all the fluids. Got a little bit of an exhaust leak underneath the front there and a little bit of a tick now. So I'm going to keep my eye on that. Just a little bit of smoke out of it still. Does rev up nice and good. So there's just one final thing to do. Definitely does Chevelle things. Had a little bit of a miss there. Probably need to rebuild that carburetor one more time, but she is running pretty good, making some really good torque. Fortunately, I think we just have the one-wheel wonder back here. Yeah, I'm doing that burnout on this concrete. Woo. She just grinds those tires up. These were brand new tires. Well, they're well broken in now. It got thick in there pretty quick, so I had to give up early, but that's going to do it here for the old Chevelle. We can't quite take her on the road just yet. There's a few safety concerns I have. Like, I'm not sure if you can tell, this front tire right here looks like it has a lot of negative camber to it compared to the others. So, I mean, this one's got a little bit, but not as bad. So I do want to get in here, probably take the wheel off, check all the brakes. I do believe some of the brake lines were replaced on this, but I'll probably go ahead and replace all those again. Maybe even do just full calipers, rotors, get the bearings changed if this has really been off the road as long as they say it has been. I'm just, I get it, trying to get it back on the road, but I definitely prefer my safety, and I live on a highway, so when I get out of here, I pretty much have to get up to 65 ASAP or I'm going to be rear-ended. So that's going to do it here for the old Chevelle. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. That little moment right there put a big smile on my face after all of the struggles. Thanks again for watching. Catch you next time.